everyone, Jaymes Mansfield here bringing you yet another video. Oh my god, you guys, I'm so excited for another episode of Iconic Brunettes! Or blondes. Brunettes or blondes, I'm not exactly sure. She changed her hair color a lot. We're doing Joan Crawford today. Yes, we are doing a Joan Crawford inspired hairdo. And this particular hairdo is Joan Crawford's hair in the 1960s when she wore hat hair, as I call it. Hair that's basically shaped to put gigantic hats or a say something hat on. So let's get started on doing Joan Crawford. So Joan Crawford was born Lucille LeSueur, and she had ambitions of being an actress, honey. Yes. Ever since she was a young girl, she had a very rough childhood. There are stories that she worked doing laundry for people. She scrubbed floors. She was doing anything she could to make ends meet for her mom and for her family because, again, she was working at such a young age. Read into her backstory, she has such a dark and sad childhood. But rising from these hard beginnings, she excelled in dancing. By the time she was old enough to start going out on her own, Joan Crawford was making herself known as a hoofer. Known for her dancing and known for being such a standout that she ended up getting cast in Our Dancing Daughters, which is like her first foray into acting. Silent pictures, folks. Back when being a dancer really, really paid off because you didn't have to learn lines yet. But Joan Crawford was beginning to become a standout in Hollywood. Like, people were buzzing about her and studios swept her up. And one studio in particular was MGM, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. Yes, they took Joan Crawford and completely repackaged her. First of all, naming her Joan Crawford. And the way she got that name is really interesting when you think about it, and really sets the stage for the person Joan Crawford would evolve into when it came to Hollywood and stardom. Now, her name was selected via a magazine contest. Like the Hollywood magazines, fans submitted names and voted on what name they think this newest actress should be named. And people all voted, and they thought she should be named Joan Arden, already taken. And they finally landed on Joan Crawford because they thought Lucille LeSueur sounded too much like sewer. And that just doesn't sound like a star. Now, when she was christened Joan Crawford, it's almost like something went off in her mind and she just realized right now, yes, this is who I am. Joan Crawford is me. Even though she didn't really like the name at first, she thought it sounded too much like crawfish or cranberry. She didn't like it. She didn't like the sound of it at first, but she soon grew to respect it. She wasn't just being given a name change. She was being given a title, a power, a new persona for her to reinvent herself. And she was constantly toying around with, who should this person be? It's almost drag the way it sounds, how she was going about shaping this persona. She was constantly going to the MGM costume department and trying on new looks and doing different photo shoots, just trying to nail down what her look was going to be. And when it came to her career, she was always searching for a new persona, a new thing to embody to connect with the American people and people universally, because that was the one thing she always strived for, was making sure the audience identified with her. So she would try on different personas. And one persona she got locked into early was being the flapper girl, the dancer, the hoofer. And she would get so much success from this. Again, it was prime time of the flapper. Every girl wanted to be like this. It was brand new, experimental, freedom with girls. Skirts were getting higher. Girls were out there dancing and partying and experimenting. And Joan Crawford was right on the forefront, trying to find out what the everyday girl was doing and how she could become that to represent them for them. As soon as she would find something that would make her a hit, she immediately would fall out of favor and had to find some new way to reinvent herself. And it's pretty iconic how she managed to reshape herself in a different image every era. She had a different era all the time, which is something I guess we expected of maybe pop stars like Madonna or Lady Gaga or somebody like that. Joan Crawford was constantly doing this. She was constantly trying to find a way to think, what is the American public doing now and how can I be that for them? So after her dancing pictures, she would shape herself into the lead star of romantic comedy. She was the girl. She was a Sandra Bullock of her time. Her and Clark Gable, her and Franchot Tone, her and all sorts of hot, gorgeous guys were getting paired up and doing these romantic comedies, and people were eating them up. And it was always kind of the same story. It's Joan Crawford as a lowly shop girl who gets swept off her feet and becomes a princess or a famous dancer or, you know, marries into wealth, something that was within like the American girl's reach, like a dream you could aspire to that wasn't too far-fetched, so that people could identify with it. And she was always constantly looking out for these kind of scripts. And she didn't mind getting locked into a type because she knew the type was her power and the people were her power. Like the more popular she became, the more capital she could acquire. And soon after she got hit after hit under her belt, she decided she wanted to break into doing more serious work. And when she approached them at MGM to start putting her in different roles, they immediately shut it down. And one role in particular would come into her grasp, and she fought for it because they did not want her to play this part. Actresses fled it, and that would be the role of Crystal Allen in The Women. Yes, this great bitchy adulteress. Now, The Women is a fantastic movie. One, it's an amazing concept. It's a film that requires nothing but women on it. It's all women. Even the dog is a woman. Like, there's no men in it whatsoever. And it was basically an experimental project to see, like, how far can we push the women's picture? Let's push it to this most extreme and make sure it's nothing but females on set. And it's all about the inner workings of drama of female friendship and basically the secrets that friends keep from one another. Like, how far are you going to go to protect your friends' feelings? Like, if you know something horrible is happening with their husband, are you going to tell them or are you just going to be quiet about it? And after she eventually does find out, because that's where our great conflict comes from, is where we're introduced to the great villain that is Crystal Allen, who is just a girl looking to excel in the world by sleeping with someone else's husband. Now, The Women was a gigantic hit for Joan Crawford and really put her out there as doing this different kind of role. The tides would soon turn in Joan Crawford's romantic comedy career because an article would get published basically naming her and several other actresses and actors such as Mae West, Marlene Dietrich, Katharine Hepburn. They were all labeled in this scathing article as box office poison, meaning these people, when they release movies, they notoriously flop at the box office. Like, they're not drawing money, which is the worst thing you could say about somebody in Hollywood because that's all they cared about at the studios. It wasn't about art. It wasn't about producing like great creative or innovative works. It was about making money. And Joan Crawford understood that. So when she saw this, she realized there was a scarlet letter board onto her that she could not shake. She would soon argue back and forth with MGM because she wanted stronger roles. Like, she had proven herself. She saw herself as being a far more respectable actress than what they were handing her. Like, she was tired of romantic comedies and basically playing the same character several times over. Like, bear in mind, she made lots of movies under them. As many as there are good ones, there's a lot of bad ones too. So she wanted to start getting more important material, at least having approval on scripts so that she can say no to things. Because back in those days, if you were handed something, it's like an assignment. You have to do it. Like, you can't just say no. So she parted ways amicably with MGM, and she was shopping around for a new place to go. And that new place would be Warner Brothers, the home studio of the Queen Bee of Hollywood, Bette Davis. Now, this would be an interesting transition for Joan Crawford because at this point, her and Bette Davis rarely crossed paths. Soon enough, their lives would intertwine in more ways than just the studio. But I'm going to steam this, and we'll get into Joan Crawford at Warner Brothers and the big hit that brought her back. Be right back. Welcome back. I have the hair all curled. This is her. Isn't she gorgeous? Oh my gosh. Now, let's get started on styling some Say Something hat hair, all right? Now, Joan Crawford did something that was a little bizarre. Now, when she signed on to Warner Brothers, she laid low for almost a year, not taking anything, all right? She was on the hunt for the perfect script to bring her back. And it would come in the form of James and Caan's famous novel, Mildred Pierce. Now, this was a noir novel, and it was a great book. If you read the book, it's nothing like the movie. Like, it's completely like watered down in the movie, but it was a really scandalous book about basically like a mom that's obsessed with her daughter, almost to the point where it's really, really weird. Like, it has a weird vibe, but it was bizarre enough to where like everyone was talking about it. It was one of those novels that was everywhere. So of course, Warner Brothers snatched it up, and Joan Crawford got wind of this because, like any good actress, she was reading everything out there trying to figure out what the next hot property was going to be. So the rumor reel started going. She heard Mildred Pierce was bought by her studio. She wanted that part. Now, the role was originally offered to Bette Davis, who turned it down. So Joan Crawford actually went so far as to audition for it. She campaigned, she lobbied, and she got the damn part. Now, Mildred Pierce, the movie, not to sneeze at it, is also very much an innovation. Like, the way Joan Crawford is lit in this movie, radiance, honestly. Like, she is beautiful. And it's such an interesting departure for her and launched her on a new path. Like I said, always reinventing and becoming this queen of noir and this like suffering in silence or strong, bitchy lady in black and white. Like, that was Joan Crawford's types. Like, this whole new series of just like strong, bitchy roles, like Mildred Pierce, humoresque, possessed, like all these amazing roles. I'm trying to think, what is that scene? I think it's humoresque, where she's at a dinner table with her co-star, this like handsome man, and the argument is so intense, and like she's completely calm and cool and collected, and then just out of a fit of rage, she just picks up the glass silently and throws it against the wall. Like, it's everything. Rumors started to buzz that Joan Crawford was going to get an Oscar nomination for Mildred Pierce. Now, this was a big deal for Joan because up to this point, Joan Crawford was known as being a movie star, not an actress. And there was a big distinction back then. People had less respect for movie stars because they were seen as people that could make a lot of money, but they weren't respected as actors or people that produce relevant or important art. So this was a big deal for Joan Crawford. Like, she knew she had to get nominated, and this would prove herself as a contender worthy of being in like the talked about actresses like Bette Davis, Katharine Hepburn, and all these other amazing actresses that are often thought of. Joan Crawford never usually entered that kind of conversation until now. People weren't really seeing that for her. So she was campaigning hard for this one, honey. Like, she was going to be a hard one to beat. And naturally, when the time of the award show came, Joan Crawford, being so nervous, stayed at home and faked being sick. Like, she couldn't even show up to the Oscar ceremony. She was that nervous how she would react if she did not win. Like, she didn't want to be there to experience that. So she faked sickness. And by the time her name was called and announced to her, she accepted her award in bed in a full face of makeup and her hair already done. That's another thing about Joan Crawford that I kind of love, is like, she is like hyper feminine to the nth degree. Like, she's so femme that she almost like goes the other way around and turns masculine again, the way she presents herself. Like, everything was just like shoulder pads, nipped in waist, big lips, big eyebrows, big hair, like everything. It just said woman. Like, she's almost like she wore femininity like armor, like a suit of armor. But like, she knew she had to do this to create a distinctive look. Like, entertainers do this nowadays too, where like they find out something that are identifiers so that you cannot mistake that that's them. And she knew that eventually, like, yeah, I'll do my lips gigantic. Like, she wanted to look like this. Like, her face was very bizarre. The way she would, like, construct herself. The big, overdone eyebrows, especially in the 60s. They got wild then. Or, like, gigantic lips. Like, she overdrawn her lips so much. And if you look at those old photos of her, you can even see, like, where her natural lips are. She's drawing, like, this much above it. I'm telling you. Drag. Like, she was putting on a persona. She saw herself as being like this hyper femme woman superhero for the everyday lady that wants to aspire to something. She knew she had to be there for them. Also, another thing I really like about her is, bitch, she was there for her fans. Like, if you wrote her a letter, she was going to write you back. You're going to get a signed autograph back because she knew that's who created her. Like, her public was everything. And like, without them, she was nothing. Even to like her last breath, she was always constantly there for the people. Like, in some of the biographies I've read, like, other actresses would recount how like she would go to great pains to make sure everyone left there with a smile on their face and had the experience of her. Like, there's a reason why like she had women that would show up to her house just to run her fan club with her. Like, they were dedicated. And of course, I have not forgotten about Mommy Dearest. We're gonna get there, just be patient. Joan Crawford, come the 1950s, her career was kind of taking a weird turn. Like, she understood that she was falling out of favor and her time was slowly like coming to an end of being like this major Hollywood star. And so she started to take a backseat. She started making a lot of appearances on television and sculpting out being known as a persona. And she was also looking for her other plans and other means of making income. Should say her celebrity status and her ability to make pictures should go away. And one marriage she would find herself in would prove to be one of the most lucrative of her career. Now, she ended up marrying the owner of Pepsi, Alfred Steele. That's right, Pepsi Cola. For a long period of time, Joan Crawford was Mrs. Pepsi Cola. She's the face of it practically. And she mascotted herself like this because she knew that this was one of America's top soda brands. Like right after Coca-Cola, Pepsi Cola was there. So she knew this was perfect for her to stay relevant in people's eyes. And her and Alfred were making sure that was going to happen. And she was drinking that shit everywhere. Almost comically so, where like stand-up comedians of the day were making jokes about her and how aggressive she was with her promotion of Pepsi. Like it's almost like, reminds me a bit of like Margot Robbie in like the Barbie movie, or like Deadpool and Wolverine. Like anywhere you look, there's advertising for this. Now, the 1950s are nothing to sneeze at. Like she has a lot of really fun movies, like sprinkled in there. One of my favorites would have to be Johnny Guitar. It's a Western starring her and Mercedes McCambridge. And it is Joan Crawford at her most hard, her most butch, and her most like hyper femme super bitch role, where it's a Western Joan Crawford with a pistol. That's all you need to hear. Her big ass eyebrows, her huge lips, and this little short cropped pixie haircut with the little spit curls in front. It's everything. And her chasing after Mercedes McCambridge in the mountains, firing guns at each other. It's everything. So much so, like, the rumor on set was that Joan Crawford was such a pain in the ass to work with on that set that Mercedes McCambridge retired from acting in films after it. That was the rumor. And come the 1960s, that whole aspect of, like, big, grand Hollywood acting was falling out of favor. Like, people didn't want to see that anymore. The younger generation craved reality. And with that came a brand new look of Hollywood stars that Joan Crawford sadly just did not fit the image of. People were looking for modern relatability, and she couldn't do that anymore. Like, she was engulfed in the idea of being a persona, and you know as little about them as possible. Or if you know anything, it's whatever filtered version of their lives she was going to let the public in on. Come the 60s, Joan Crawford was approaching on 50 years old, and she knew she needed one big hit to bring her back and hopefully give her work for another period of years before she had to reinvent herself yet again. Like I said, always searching, always reading books, always finding new properties and keeping an eye on what was selling. She picked up the copy of Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. And she knew she had one last ace up her sleeve that was guaranteed to get her a lot of attention. And she knew how important it was. So we're going to get into it. I'm going to tease this and I'll be right back. And we'll talk about the big picture that brought Joan Crawford back yet again. Welcome back. All right. Now, I got started on styling the hair a little bit off camera. Let's get into Joan Crawford's triumphant return and Whatever Happened to Baby Jane and the many of weird shenanigans that came to follow after said movie. Now, Joan Crawford knew one guaranteed moneymaker and something guaranteed to get her attention was if she paired herself up with Bette Davis. She had this in her back pocket for years. She'd always anticipated on working with her. She was just keeping an eye out for the perfect opportunity to make this decision. So, as I would mention, Whatever Happened to Baby Jane by Henry Farrell was a gigantic little hit of a book. Like, it's a fun little trashy novel about two sisters that basically, with deception and, you know, keeping things from one another and just like these conversations that should be had and just never happen. And the way it festers and brews into something altogether very evil and sad. Whatever Happened to Baby Jane was so layered and so fun and poking a little bit at Hollywood, but not to a point where it would make Hollywood defend its own. But it also was just like examining the idea of child stars and actresses after their times have passed and actresses that have dreams that are never realized. Like, it was so layered and so interesting for what was initially dismissed as a trashy little novel. But Henry Farrell had a finger on a pulse of really fun, different kind of campy ideas, like with Whatever Happened to Cousin Charlotte, which became Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte, or Such a Gorgeous Creature Like Me, which became a hit French film. Like, he has a lot of really fun ideas. Joan Crawford approached Bette Davis with this idea. And Bette Davis was a little apprehensive at first, but she knew she needed to do something to get her career back going because they weren't going to have her for Night of the Iguana like she was doing on Broadway. Like, she was too long in the tooth to be a major actress. And this would also be something that was brought up time and time again when they were pitching the film. Like, many studios passed on it because they said, yeah, we would do it, but could you probably cast younger women in the roles? Like, who the hell wants to see those two old dogs? Like, they really did not think Bette Davis or Joan Crawford would sell tickets whatsoever. Now, many rumors would fly on the set of Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, many of which were pushed out by Hollywood gossip rags with no actual proof whatsoever that there was any kind of shenanigans happening at all. Like, the only thing that was kind of concretely done, which Bette Davis even admitted to, was she was a little annoyed at Joan Crawford's insistence on Pepsi. And Joan Crawford was, like, all about Pepsi at that point, where she had a Pepsi machine, everything. Even so, going so far as, like, Robert Aldrich, who loved Coca-Cola, an avid Coca-Cola drinker, she would take his bottle and dump it out into a paper cup and hand it back to him. Like, that's the extent she would go. She did not want Coke anywhere on set. But Bette Davis, to pull a prank and get under her skin and be funny, had a Coke machine brought in and installed. Like, none of them have any kind of concrete proof that they ever really happened. Like Joan Crawford wearing a weighted belt or wanting to have falsies on so her breast didn't look saggy. Again, like, it's all just little things that were pushed out as gossip. But the ladies knew, like, they should play to their strengths and play to the feud to make sure that it got people to go there and see that. Because they know people wanted to see them go toe-to-toe for decades. Truth be told, like, Be Kind Rewind has a great video on this whole feud. But further examining is, like, when you look at them, yeah, they both were, like, major actresses with hits under the belt, but they weren't really similar whatsoever. So the idea of them being against each other never really quite made sense in my mind because they made completely different movies. So I never quite understood why they were always pitted against each other. The movie would become what they call in the industry a sleeper hit. And what I mean by that is, like, it wasn't a hit right away, but it started to build traction and eventually become this huge moneymaker that people had to stand up and take notice and go see this. And eventually the studios had noticed this too. Bette Davis was nominated for an Academy Award for Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. However, Joan Crawford was not. And this is also very interesting because when you think about the Academy Awards that year, especially for supporting, which is where Joan Crawford realistically would have ended up, but probably not. They probably put her in Best Actress because they're weird like that. But she should have been in Best Supporting Actress because honestly, the movie falls apart without Joan. Like, you need her there as Betty's foil. It doesn't work unless she's there. The story goes that Joan campaigned heavily to make sure that Bette Davis did not win this Academy Award. And if you ask Bette Davis, all the way up until the day she died, she would claim that Joan Crawford was the reason she did not get this award. She went everywhere and to anyone that would listen and told them not to vote for her. However, when you really realistically look at the situation, Bette Davis was going up against Anne Bancroft in The Miracle Worker. Now, The Miracle Worker is the big screen adaptation of the Broadway play about Helen Keller. Anne Bancroft famously plays the teacher that teaches her, you know, how to learn and speak and everything. It's a very dramatic, very, very, very intense, very demanding role that Anne Bancroft had been playing on Broadway for a while, all right? Like, it's one of those roles, like, you're guaranteed to win an Oscar if this gets made into a movie. Like, Bae, I'm sorry, you playing a has-been child star was not going to beat Anne Bancroft in The Miracle Worker in any universe. I'm sorry, it just wasn't going to happen. Like, realistically, no. No one says that, but okay. But that's what I always found so fascinating. Like, even like listening to like reading Bette Davis's book, This and That, she talks a little about it, and you're just like, Betty, sweetie, princess, no. This would lead them to create a whole nother subgenre of horror called the psycho-biddy genre. Grand dame guignols, in other words, but psycho-biddy is pretty much the industry term for it, which is old lady in danger or crazy old lady movies. Think like, you know, Whatever Happened to Aunt Alice, Whoever Slew Auntie Roo, What's the Matter with Helen? Oh my goodness, yeah, this was a whole genre, and almost every lady of a certain age in Hollywood did a film like this. And they're all great. Like, they all have their own place and camp and everything. Like, they're all very camp. One of my favorites is Lady in a Cage with Olivia de Havilland. She's in the middle of a home invasion, and she's stuck inside her elevator, which is like trapped in between the first and second floor, and they can only just reach her. There's so many good ones. Or Whatever Happened to Aunt Helen, where she's inviting old ladies to her house to live in with her so she can murder them and steal their life insurance. Ugh, good times had by all. Now, Joan Crawford would do a slew of these movies. She would do her next film after this. Well, let's backtrack a little bit. Whatever Happened to Baby Jane was a big hit for all women involved. And they decided they wanted to try and follow this up and immediately do a sequel. And this is right after the whole Academy Awards debacle happened. But Joan Crawford agreed and signed on to do Hush Hush, Sweet Charlotte, which again was working on the title, Whatever Happened to Cousin Charlotte. Hush Hush, Sweet Charlotte is about Charlotte, said character. She is a spinster that lives her whole life secluded in a mansion she never leaves because she was blamed for the death of her boyfriend, who had his hand and his head hatched off after he told Charlotte he could not marry her. She was blamed for this. And people have led to believe that she was like this crazy old girl and she lived in her mansion, never left it. It's amazing. But Joan Crawford was originally brought in to play cousin Miriam, who comes in to try and save Charlotte. And let's just say filming took a turn for the worst. Joan Crawford famously got sick, and people did not believe she was actually sick, and she was fired from the production, and it became a huge debacle. She left the production and would go on to work with William Castle and make the film Straight Jacket, which is a hilariously awful movie that I guarantee you have to watch. Joan Crawford dressed as Mildred Pierce, wielding an axe. I always loved Joan Crawford because she's one of those people that like is so there for like diva moments. And even like watching behind the scenes for Straight Jacket, the girl that plays her daughter famously remarks like, what I thought was so fascinating about working with her is like she was very nice and very there for you, but the set was fucking freezing. She's like absolutely like a freezer in there, and she could not understand why. And it wasn't until many years later that she was told it was in Joan's contract that the sets had to be ice cold because it kept her skin tight. Like she did not want any kind of heat or anything on that set because it would cause her to start to like sag a little bit. So she had to be basically like meat in a freezer. Like it was in her contract, like that set must be freezing. Now, Joan Crawford's films got worse and worse. Like they said, Straight Jacket was fun and campy and was a big hit with audiences because Joan Crawford toured everywhere with it. She didn't care what the final result was or how good it was. She was just happy to see her face on a screen and the fact that a younger generation knew who she was and was excited about seeing her movies. Now, her final film would unfortunately be the horrendous movie Trog. Rumor has it, like, she got ready in her car doing it. I don't think there's any truth to this, but that was the rumor. Like, she got ready in her car for some of the scenes just because they're, like, on such rough locations where they could not afford to have a trailer for her. This would be her last foray. And Joan Crawford would still make public appearances here and there. Like, I think one of the things I remember from, like, those flashback commercials, they used to show, like, throwback commercials. She did, like, the Mountain Dew campaign and everything when that was first launched. She was still very much heavily involved in Pepsi up until her husband's death. And when Alfred Steele died, it really hit her hard because she loved that man. And, like, she built her whole life around being a part of Pepsi. And as soon as he was out, they wanted her out. And that's where that famous scene from Mommy Dearest comes, where she made sure she kept her foot down. She would still up that company to an extent. She knew the power she had from her publicity and what she had brought them. However, sadly, age was starting to catch up with her, and as the old story goes, there was a famous picture of Joan Crawford and Rosalind Russell that was published. And Joan Crawford did not love the way she looked in this photo. It was very harshly lit, and she wasn't looking great. So she decided, if that's the way the public sees me, they'll never see me again. And she went into hiding after that and became more of a recluse. That's the old Hollywood story, and it's the fun story to talk about. But in reality, she was sick. She was very, very sick. She had cancer, and she was only getting sicker. And she had learned some rumblings that her daughter, Christina, who after her teenage years, she did not have a very warm relationship with, was writing a book. She had heard that there was a book being written about her, and it was about her and Christina. And getting wind of this, Joan Crawford made some decisions with her will and made a decision to take out Christina and Christopher both from her will, leaving only a small sum for the twins. Yes, she had other children. It wasn't just Christina and Christopher. She also adopted twins. And the rest of her money was left to cancer research and other various charities. Like, she had never really made huge intentions to like disperse her wealth out to like her family and shit like that. Like, she was more about like giving back, which is another thing about her, which is also like, she was one of those people that was charitable to an extreme measure. Or like if she had it, she gave it away. And she was also very much trying to instill that in her own children too. It's like, if you have something, you should also give back. So that's that whole famous scene in Mommy Dearest. Like, Christmas was always miserable for her because you never actually got to keep more than one gift. Or for your birthday party even, just one gift. All right, spray. Now, I'm not here to debate Mommy Dearest and what's true and what's not. That's really not my place. I always stick to what Faye Dunaway famously says. Whatever happened between those people, only God knows, okay? And that's just where I'm going to stick with that too. You can debate that till you're blue in the face. Honestly, I'm just here to talk about her career. And what a career she left behind. Honestly, even with Mommy Dearest and everything, I feel like it still folded her into pop culture in a way that can't be ignored. And furthermore, I was so excited to even be a part of that Joan Crawford the Musical when I was on All Stars, because it was a fun way of shedding light on an often overlooked Hollywood star who was fun and campy and is iconic in the gay community. And she was also very friendly with the gay community, even commenting when she would do like those A Night with the Stars back in the 70s when she was just doing tours. Her whole audience was nothing but gay guys. And even remarking on that, she's like, well, I've always been very friendly with them, and they like me and I like them. She basically has lived by the life of, I love whoever loves me. All right, we have our hat hair ready. Now, this is hair for a bitch that's going to wear a big old say something hat. I'm so excited to try this on and priss it up a little bit. So I'm going to trim this lace, and I'll be right back with our final results. Don't fuck with me, fellas. This ain't my first time at a Wig Wednesday. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to be back here giving you some Joan Crawford hair. Now, Joan Crawford, I think, is one of the most fascinating old Hollywood actresses. Like, what an interesting, bizarre life she led. But like, she had such an intense career and such an interesting like personal life and everything. Like, honestly, go to her IMDb and pack a lunch. Like, there's a lot to uncover there, okay? I hope you enjoyed this little video about Joan Crawford and how to style hair just like her. If you'd like to own this wig, she'll be available at jaymesmansfieldbeauty.com. In the used wig section, I used the best actress in Honey Blonde for this Iconic Brunettes. Don't tell anyone, okay? It's our little secret. Now, if there's an iconic blonde or brunette or even a redhead that you want to see in the future, be sure and leave her down below. I am always listening. I promise iconic redheads will come eventually. I just got really busy, okay? I don't mean to prolong this as much as I have. It's not that I hate redheads. Now, personally, I really love Joan Crawford's work. Like, she's got some amazing bangers of films out there, okay? Definitely check out, like, Female on the Beach, Humoresque, Daisy Canyon, Love on the Run, one of my personal favorites. Berserk with her as running a circus. I also like using YouTube super thanks from Abby. Thank you, Abby. Howard. Thank you, Howard. PP Pants. God damn it. Roger. Thank you so much, Roger. And Norman. Thank you all so much for the YouTube super thanks. And before I go, I'd like to take a moment for my wiglets. Roll it! And I'd like to take a moment for my wiglets. Jacob, Ernie, Duke, Just BKZ, Vera, myself, Sponge King, Pearface, Steve, So Many Kitties, JT, Christine, Curtis, Miss Mosey D, Romeo and Juliet, Rose, Darth Curray, Catalina, Miss Lansing, Maureen, Veronica, Molly, Carl, Dolores, Loreza, Martha, Louise, Harmon, Astro, B-Rex, Matthew, Roger, Tyler, Brian, Margarita, Adam, Samuel, Michael, Beck Up, Chrissy, Akoni, Jason, JJ, Nisi, Roy, Eliza, Doug, Peach, Miki, CCC, Midnight, Lazarus, Temporal Insanity, Mondo, Fourth Greenery, Kristen Paraic, Anita Bidet, Bree, Selena, Ricky, Smashly, Brooklyn, Monty, Sarah, Missy, February Roses, Dirkus, Marsha, Darth Patty, Kaylane, Joey, Not Edward Furlong, Myron, Daniel, Gwendolyn, and Pack. Thank you all so much, Wiglets. Thank you so much, Wiglets. And a special thank you to the Wiglets that sat and watched me film this video. That's right. The whole process of me making this video has been documented in the Wiglets only exclusive section. So if you want to be part of the Cool Kids Club, maybe consider becoming a Wiglet or, you know, stay lame. Now, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, see you in the live streams. Bye. Now hit the outro. Click here and see how I'd look every day if I worked at Ulta. Or see how I'd look if I was the overlord at MAC Cosmetics. Come on, click it. You know you want to. If you don't click it, you're super lame. So click it.
Only it's cooler. This is a nice place you got here. Oh, there's food. Where's the wine? Make room for me. I'm still Jenny from the block. I wore this dress to my prom. Can you believe it still fits? It's J. Cool, the one from The Watcher.